Well, welcome to another video by Rick Miracle, a continuation of this book. Which is the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena, UFOs. And as we reviewed, governed and directed and led by some very high-level people with serious credentials. Professors, aeronautic professionals, officers in the Air Force, meteorologists, people like you and me, police officers, school teachers. So anyways, let's get to more of the UFO sightings and descriptions as investigated by the NICAP, National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena. This is published in 1964. So anyways, reading this, are UFOs still being seen? That's the question. In 1964. This is probably the most common question asked by casually interested persons. Are UFOs still being seen? The answer is yes. But the sighting reports do not receive the publicity they once did. Alright, a grayish disc-shaped object which hovered, wobbled on its axis, then evaded pursuit was sighted October 2nd, 1961 at Salt Lake City, Utah Airport. 1961. So, from what I've been reading in these reports, and I'll keep going, but I want to come back to 1961, that date. His report, and I'm only reading my highlighted parts here. If you get interested, you can go online and get this book document. His report. I was preparing to take off in a Mooney Mark 20A. Mooney Mark 20A. I suppose that's a type of aircraft. From the north-south runway at Utah Central Airport, when I noticed a bright spot in the sky over the southern end of Salt Lake City. After I was airborne and trimmed for my climb out, I noticed that the bright spot was still about in the same position as before. I turned out of the pattern and proceeded toward the spot to get a better look. As I drew nearer, I could see that the object had no wings, nor tail, nor any other exterior control surfaces protruding from what appeared to be the fuselage. It seemed to be hovering with a little rocking motion. As it rocked up away from me, I could see that it was a disc-shaped object. I would guess the diameter at about 50 to 55 feet, the thickness in the middle at about 8 to 10 feet. It had the appearance of sandblasted aluminum. I could see no windows, or doors, or any other openings, nor could I see any landing gear doors, etc., protruding nor showing. Continuing on, it rose abruptly about 1,000 feet above me as I closed in. Then it went off on a course of about 170 degrees for about 10 miles, where it again hovered with a little rocking motion. It went completely out of sight in 2 or 3 seconds. So there's a little picture here in this document showing you his first position, as you can see here. And then the thing just climbed straight up, and then it zipped over, and then it zipped away. And he's the guy in the plane. There's a point. I'm not trying to beat this subject up, but I'm trying to thoroughly, for myself, which I'm learning as I study this stuff, and for others, that this stuff was real, apparently, reported by some reputable, investigated by some reputable people, reported by many people. And here it goes here. Provo said that they could not see the object, but at least 8 to 10 people did see it from the ground at Utah Central Airport. They said they had it in sight again. The guys on the ground said it went straight up and it finally left. Later that month, an engineer in Pennsylvania saw a formation of 4 disc-shaped objects with apparent lights or ports on the rims. So some of the reports look like this. They have drawings showing what they saw. And then you got affidavits and descriptions here. So somebody did a meticulous job at this. April 24, 1949. On that date, set up in 1949, a balloon crew was at the White Sands Proving Grounds in New Mexico. What they saw, the object was an ellipsoid, about 2 1/2 times as long as it was wide. It had a length of about 0.02 degrees subtended angle and was gleaming white in color. It did not have metallic or reflected shine. Towards the underside near the tail, the gleaming white became a light yellow. See, once you start reading these descriptions, you start to get to notice a pattern. The object, readily visible to the naked eye, seen by all the members of the group, filled the field of the theodolite's 25 power scope. So the telescope they were looking at, the object filled the entire field. It disappeared in a sharp climb after having been visible to Moore and his group for about 60 seconds. So you had a group out there, a balloon crew at White Sands Proving Grounds. These would be some pretty respectable people. I mean, they work for the military or big company, launching balloons, testing the atmosphere, and they have a high-powered telescope, and they're reporting a UFO description. Alright, it says here, it disappeared in a sharp climb after having been visible to Moore and his group for about 60 seconds. Should we believe these people? Almost 200 pages here of descriptions. The object was seen under conditions of a cloudless sky and no haze. It left no vapor trail or exhaust. No noise of any kind was heard in connection with the sighting. Another sighting by General Mills. It's funny who the companies that are involved in this stuff. General Mills. Don't they make cereal? These people are involved in everything, and if they're working for the government on contracts, it scares me, and I mean, I have to say this, but if this General Mills works for the government, and who knows if they're tied in with the Al Gore's sky spraying, weather control. My point is, could they be putting anything into the children's cereal? Would you be surprised if they were? You know, mind control, fluoride, whatever. Look what they put in the vaccines. Look at Monsanto Foods, which a lot of people call Frankenstein foods. The seeds are genetically modified, DNA manipulation, and the foods that they produce, it has been reported that I have read in many reports, do not reckon your cells in your body, your digestive system, the way that your cells extract nutrients from the food digested in the acid of your stomach. The cells don't recognize some of the Monsanto foods as food. They see it as an enemy. Well, wouldn't they? I mean, they've modified, with the herbicide resistant DNA strands, pesticide resistant DNA material. They altered the chemical makeup of the food. So I'm thinking, here I go out to the pub for a beer, which is made out of barley and wheat and stuff like that. If it's Monsanto grains and they're making beer out of it, I could be putting something in my body that is horribly destructive to my body. Not that beer is good for you. All right, moving back to my book. I get to rambling on. General Mills personnel in the vicinity of White Sands, New Mexico, was reported by Captain Edward Rupert, former chief of the Air Force Project Blue Book UFO Investigations Group. So the Air Force had a group of people they put together to receive all the sightings, reports from citizens across the USA and the world. As you could expect, most citizens, if they see something that strange, a silvery disc in the sky, flying along, they want to report it. They feel it's their duty to report it. So the Air Force had to come up with a group to handle those incoming calls and make the people feel rest assured that their sighting has been documented and is going to be investigated. But did they do that? And did they share the results of those investigations with the public? The answer is no, and there are plenty of documents that they extremely emphatically said no. And it's groups like this that went against the grain, kind of a renegade divergent group of people who published this stuff anyways. Moving back to this General Mills sighting at White Sands, suddenly they noticed two tiny specks on the horizon moving rapidly toward them. The object shot straight toward the balloon, tipped on edge, revealing their disc-shaped. Can you imagine you see something like this and circled the balloon once, flew off over the horizon. In comparison with the known size of the balloon, the discs were estimated to be 60 feet in diameter. Moving on, I happened to be looking at the west in the direction of my farm buildings. This would have been 1954, Cherry Valley, New York, 4 p.m. The witness was Major A.B. Cox, graduate of Yale University, member of the American Society of Mechanical Engineering and the Society of American Engineers. Should we believe him? Perhaps a half a mile distant, and saw something which at first glance was about over my farm buildings. It was quite low and did not seem to be more than a few hundred feet above the earth. I thought at first it was a large airplane, not moving very swiftly. By the way, that's how your brain works. Your brain immediately tries to deliver to your consciousness an explanation. It's like me when I see words and I say them, and as I'm looking, it's not the correct word. My brain is picking a choice of words from the shape of it and delivering it to me, and then when I focus and realize it, I realize that my brain has made a mistake, which I spoke the wrong word. I misspoke. So I apologize for that when I do it, but I've noticed that's what happens. you look down and your brain shoots at what it is, and when you look closer at the letters, you see what it really is. It was moving horizontally in a direction parallel to my own direction. Then I noticed that it seemed to make no noise, and then I could not see any wings or tail or fuselage generally. You see what I'm saying? You keep reading these descriptions and you start getting pick up a message. You go, there's a similarity to a lot of these things. You know, disc shape or glowing orbs or yellow or red and no tail and no noise. It seemed to be a large disc or lens-shaped object, and in comparison with the objects below, I estimated it to be perhaps 30 to 35 feet in diameter. It was moving like a wheel, sliding sideways, not rotating. It came up and then passed me. I must have seen it for 20 seconds or a little more. Then it got ahead of me and it presented the appearance of a circular disc, perhaps 5 or 6 feet thick. The color see how much I highlighted here, how much valuable information is here. I'm not going to read all this from this book. Maybe in my next video I'll catch some more of it. Suddenly it stopped and seemed to be going in the direction more or less at right angles to its first motion, but still in an upright direction. This sudden stop interested me as an engineer because any sudden retardation or acceleration requires in so large an object the application of a very considerable force, and seemed a much shorter turn and more rapid turn than any airplane I'd ever seen was capable of. Alright, so there's a new subject line here. Asks that, are UFOs intelligently controlled? The accumulation of reports by good observers and some of the special evidence such as radar trackings strongly suggests this hypothesis. UFOs intelligently controlled. The curiosity evidenced by the 2 discs which circled the skyhook balloon. How else can one explain reports such as the following of objects approaching at meteor-like speed, then hovering or maneuvering? So it flies in like a meteorite and just starts to hover. Oh my gosh, the shooting star stopped. The trail was of a red color and appeared to be coming down at about an angle of 20 degrees in my line of sight in a southerly direction. Only the red trail was visible for about 2 seconds, then a small white dot became visible. The white object had an apparent diameter of 1/64 to 1/32 of an inch. For about 10 seconds, the object was following a gradual curved path in process of leveling off. Then the object was flying level on a course almost due west. Just reading some highlighted sentences that I felt were important and relative. To the naked eye, the object appeared as a sphere at about 1/16 diameter. Through a 6-power telescope, the object presented a larger disk, but the brightness did not appreciably increase. After traveling a course almost due west for approximately 1 mile, the object turned toward the northwest and appeared to circle over San Diego Bay and Point Loma, and then disappeared, traveling north at a constant altitude and speed. During the entire time, the object was visible, and there was absolutely no apparent sound created by it. Despite its terrific speed in its dive, there was no shock wave or noise from its power source. All right, back again. About 9:25 p.m., Mr. Carr observed what appeared to be the same object returning from the north and circling west. So this is 9:25, and he first saw the object at 8:55. So a half an hour later, the object returns. It passed over downtown San Diego, where bright ground lights seemed to reflect off the metal hull. It is my conviction, Mr. Carr stated, that since this object followed an apparently controlled course, it was not moving under the influence of gravity and must have been guided by an intelligence unknown to us. Its dive from an extreme altitude at possible meteoric speed, the speed of a meteor, its deceleration, leveling off, and circle the city twice indicate that it arrived from interplanetary space and was under intelligence control. From my studying, I've been having an observation, or it's helped me come up with a theory. Here's a little map that Mr. Carr or somebody made to describe his description of the activity. So you can go online and find this book. It's an invaluable piece of information here. Made up by some very credible people, so they say. A multiple visual and multiple radar sightings similarly suggested controlled flight occurred on August 12, 1953, near Rapid City, South Dakota. The object the UFO was first spotted hovering over the eastern sky by the Ground Observer Corps. It moved in over the city, then back to its original position. Then ground radar began tracking the UFO, and an F-84 was scrambled and vectored in on the object, chasing it for 120 miles. Both the UFO and the jet showed plainly on the GCI radar screen. Each time the jet began to close in, the UFO would move ahead with a burst of speed. When the pilot gave up and turned back to base, the UFO turned and followed. So the jet chased the UFO ran away. Then when the jet ceased its pursuit and started to return to base, the UFO turned around and followed the jet. That's intelligent control, you'd think. And a second F-84 scrambled and chased the UFO for 160 miles, obtained a radar lock-on. The UFO again stayed just out of reach. When the pilot switched on his radar ranging gun sight, and the red light blinked on, showing something real and solid was ahead of him, the pilot was scared. So the pilot was chasing the UFO, turned on his radar, it showed up as a red blip. The pilot realized it was real and he was scared. He asked the controller if he could break off the intercept. Anyways, at the climax of the sighting, when the pilot became frightened, ground radar showed the jet and the UFO. The pilot's gun sight radar showed the UFO, and the pilot could see with his own eyes a speeding, unidentified light in front of him. NICAP, that's these people. Note, the fact that the gun camera photos showed an image on all its further proof that something real and solid was outspeeding the jet interceptors. Suddenly, here's another sighting. Suddenly, he and his co-pilot, Peter McIntosh, noticed a bright light through the upper part of the windshield. The plane was on a southwesterly course, and the object, looking like a meteor, we continue to hear about this meteor speed thing, was falling across their path from left to right, but instead of burning out, the meteor halted abruptly directly in front of the plane. And it just stops. "What the hell is it? A jet?" McIntosh shouted. As the UFO remained a constant distance in front of the plane, Captain Hull grabbed his microphone and called mobile tower. "Look out towards the north and east and see if you can see a strange white light hovering in the sky." Immediately after the radio exchange, the UFO began to move. It darted back and forth, rising and falling, making extremely sharp turns, sometimes changing course to 90 degrees in an instant. The color and size remained constant. The UFO ceased its violent maneuvers and again appeared to hover over the plane, ahead of the plane. About this time, mobile tower called. At this moment, the UFO began another series of crazy gyrations, lazy eights and square chandelas, and then shot out over the Gulf of Mexico, rising to a steep angle. It is the fact that when it came steeply downward, and when it departed, after an amazing show, it went steeply upward. This object came at us from the west. At first it looked like a red hot piece of coal, about the size of a quarter held at arm's length. In a matter of seconds it was as large as a ruler held at arm's length. This is when it came to a complete stop. The shape of the object was distinct. See illustration. The body of the object was solid bright red, and it gave off a pulsating red glow completely around the object. The object hovered a few seconds and then made a left turn and hovered for a few seconds, then went straight up like a shot. We watched it until it was completely faded beyond the stars. There's the description they said they saw. So that's enough of this. There's plenty more here to do. But I thought I would kind of diversify this a little bit and make a couple comments. One of those comments I'd like to make is the timing. And the timing in particular is quite clear on this page here. These are UFO sightings. And if you look at the dates, starting at the top, 1956, and down at the bottom, 1962. Now this is going to be an amazing piece of information. So anyways, reported shape and appearance. 1956, December, circular. And I'm not going to read all these, but I'll give you the gist of a few of them. U.S. Air Force F-86 investigated unidentified radar blip, experienced radar interference as he saw and tried to close the circular UFO. When pursued, object shot up and away. 1957, Beaumont, Houston, large object with 3 brilliant white body lights. Witnesses pilots, Transvaal, Africa, cylinder, witnesses by many people. San Carlos, Uruguay, top look like a top, saw by a pilot. 1958, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, orange light, man and sun. 1958, October, 4 object elongated, train crew. 1959, blindingly brilliant light by a truck driver. That's Pennsylvania. Brazil, luminous object pilot airport observers. 1960, Mantiquate, Venezuela, bright light source by pilots. Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, luminous disc airline pilot. Salt Lake, Utah, disc private pilot airport observers. Detail, New Mexico, 4 light sources, man and wife. Hawthorne, New Jersey, object with 2 body lights, night watchman. Hawthorne, New Jersey, did we just see that one out? Bright light source, police and others. So, 1957 to 1961. So I asked myself, when was John Kennedy president? When was he killed? So I went on Wikipedia and I did a little study on Mr. John Kennedy. And from 57, you're going to love this, from 53 to 1960, he was U.S. Senate. And from 47 to 53, he was in the House of Representatives. So 47 to 53 to 60. So about 14, 13 years he was in the Senate or the House of Representatives. During the period when they were having these insane sightings across the United States, so he certainly knew about all those from being in the Senate and in the House of Representatives. He would have definitely known. I'm sure that in the hallways and the reports with the Air Force and contacting the president. So before he was president, he was in the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. for 15 years almost. So he was probably privy, and before that he was a commander on a ship during the war. So he was certainly somebody who was in the lead and in the know. And then, of course, when he got to be president elected in 60, he became president in 61. And their UFO sightings were off the chart. And the another thing here about his decision to go to the moon. The Russians, cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin became the first human in space in April 12, 1961. So UFO sightings are off the chart. The people in Congress, Washington, D.C., all the people, especially somebody like Kennedy, were in the know. And so then, because cosmonaut Yuri became the first human in space, apparently greatly embarrassing the U.S., that's when Kennedy decided we would embark on a going to the moon before the end of the decade program. And lots and tons of money was spent, of course. NASA's overall human spaceflight efforts were guided by Kennedy's speech. Gemini and Apollo were designed to execute Kennedy's goal. His goal was achieved on July 20th, 1969, when Apollo 11 Commander Neil Armstrong stepped off the lunar module's ladder onto the moon's surface. You know, it's extraordinary. Now remember, if you don't know a little bit about me, but I did work at a major aerospace company from 79 to 89 near Kennedy Space Center. An electronic technician, engineering technician. So I've worked on some of the electronics of satellites in space, F-18 jet, B-1B bomber, space shuttle parts and stuff like that for 10 years. And I'm here to tell you now that I, as a technician, I would have to repair, we had contracts with the government, and I had to repair some of the stuff that they sent back that failed. And those electronics were faulty. They were erratic. They were actually chips or stuff that plugged in little sockets and stuff. So they weren't stable. So it just behooves me to see how he could decide after the people went to the Yuri went into space around the Earth, 61, 62, that they could pull off a program in 7 years with the technology to go to the moon, not once, but several times. And so something wasn't right, is what I'm trying to say. And then we also know that in 1957, news headlines were all over the USA. Newspapers had been instructed by the government and the Air Force to nix the news, to keep the stuff out of the news, to ridicule anybody who saw a UFO. And but it was affecting the nerves and the people in Congress and the Senate and obviously the presidency. Newspapers were instructed not to publicize the UFO sighting or anything else. So we wonder why Kennedy, everybody wonders why he was assassinated, and there seems to be numerous reasons. But the UFO thing was certainly something, especially the fear factor and all the sightings. He would have definitely been involved and known about all that stuff. So moving on, I thought I would check and see what's going on in 2014. So we know that they were having sightings, and we know what the descriptions were like looking at this book. UFO Evidence by a very reputable group of people, going against the grain where the government wanted to hush the news. And then, Kennedy was in there, and then he gets killed when he wants to probably make some disclosure. So anyways, I thought I'd see what's going on with 2014. And it's extraordinary. That's all I can say. Extraordinary. So I went on MUFON, one of the largest, I guess, UFO reporting sites. So if you see a UFO, you can go on the internet on MUFON, MUFO, MUFON. Anyways, here's the a list of some of the sightings I saw on there, recent sightings, and it's a 2-page thing. Here's another page. Thought I'd read a little bit to you about this. I think it's probably pertinent and relevant. And remember, this series is Masonry and Satanism. And if we know anything about the Illuminati and the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers and the Morgans and the Chases and the banksters who control and pay for the politicians to be where they are. So obviously all those banksters, Illuminati, Satanists, Luciferian folks are quite well aware of all the UFO sightings and what was done about it, and to hush it up. And the Masonic people, or a lot of your presidents were all Masons, and a lot of your politicians were all Masons. George Bush, Skull and Bones, Kerry, Skull and Bones. So these behind-the-scenes organizations that control the money, control the politicians, control what the public knows. So I decided to go on MUFON Case Management System, last 20 sightings. This ought to be interesting. 11/23, November 23, 2014. That would have been the other day. It was like a falling star without a tail and a bright green in color. Well, we heard about that during the 57 to 60s. 11/23. That was in Los Angeles, by the way. This one's in Anaheim. Large black donut-shaped circle object. Anaheim. Okay, then another one on 10/29, October 29. Bright light caught my eye thought it was a plane coming in for a landing, but it never got closer or further. Calgary, Canada. 11:23. Persecution by a flying light in the darkness of night. I guess a flying light was following this guy. Delaware. 11:22. Not first time of sighting. Seen several times. Looks like a falling star at first, but very bright. With binoculars, it is a large round ball with multicolored balls spinning around it. It turns in all directions. Wow. West Virginia. Think the guy was drinking? A big light with lights all spinning around it. Bright light moved in many different directions, looked much like a star. Australia. Bright lime green shooting star with no tail. I thought it was really strange. Tucson, Arizona. Bright white light meteor looking craft stops, turns into an orange ball of light over Highway 95. Huh. Bright white meteor looking craft, so it looks like a meteor, like a shooting star. Stops, turns into orange ball of light over Highway 95, Carmel, Maine, USA. I like to show these when I can, and that description seems like a good time to show it. I was in Orlando, went out on my patio and saw this light coming, and at first I dismissed it. I thought it was a helicopter light or something. Who goes out there and tries to believe it's a UFO? Again, that's not what your brain initially thinks. Your brain tries to give you a normal explanation. That's a tree when I'm shooting up between the tree branches, leaves. Anyways, there was more than one. You can see, I think, two in this picture. One on the bottom left. And they were orange orbs. I wish I could have found my video camera. I looked for it, but I couldn't find it. When I see this was an orange orb, I know you're not convinced yet, but hang on there. Just thought I would show you these. I had to blow them up at the pharmacy to get off of my camera. There were about 7 in all. Here's a picture with 3. And they were coming in over the horizon, one after another over the tree line. And after the first or second or third one, I freaked out and I said, oh my God, that's not normal. That's when I finally found my camera and started shooting the pictures. And my good camera I couldn't find on the spur of the moment. But here you can see 3 of them. So they look like a bright orange ball, and it was a series of like 7, and they were spaced so far apart that you couldn't get all 7 in the video. When I read these descriptions, it just confirms that I'm not alone, and you can see the pictures. But these are the descriptions a lot of people describe. Bright white meteor-looking craft stops, turns, and turns into orange ball. That's what these things look like, orange balls. At first I thought they were those bags with a candle inside or something. But they were actually flying at the speed of a plane, and then when they got towards my place, they went straight up. Alright, object taking off. This is 11/20/2014 in New Zealand, I guess. Object taking off vertically at high speed, turns 90 degrees, sped at the high speed then from both horizons in less than 2 minutes. Two bright lights heading from south to west, Butler, Pennsylvania. Bright orange, shining light. You saw mine. Slowly in straight line directly over. Mine were flying, I guess this slowly would be like a plane flying, you know, getting ready for a landing or coming from an airport and then shooting up. A bright orange shining light flew slowly in straight line directly over. No sound of any time. And these things I saw in Orlando, Florida made no sound. First saw them from a distance, then watched it fly away. Constant, extremely bright light entire time. Mechanicsville, Virginia. Meteor-like object moving slowly across evening sky with flaming tail. Murfreesboro, Tennessee. Apparent fireball leaving trail moving slower than a meteor. Abrupt change of direction, Murfreesboro, Tennessee. Observed craft accidentally. Was viewing building when noticed reflection of craft. Minneapolis, Minnesota. Silver shining cigar-shaped objects in the sky. Flintville, Winchester. White round spherical. This is 11/21. These are all current. Glowing object, West Valley City, Utah. Lights illuminated. One light literally shot beam down towards ground. So the light had a beam going down towards the ground like a flashlight beam. But too far away and dark outside to see anything was present in beam. Were they beaming somebody up? I have seen this for the whole month of November. Every other night, 2 or 3 lights, bright white, red, yellow, Waterville, New York. Wow, that reminds me of something. In one of my previous videos, we did an entire video on this book. Night Siege. The Hudson Valley UFO sightings from I think it was 83 to 84. Football field craft-sized shapes were seen in the sky in Hudson Valley, New York, Connecticut, Western Massachusetts. Get this book. For 2 years, people would be pulled over all across the interstate. You'd be driving along and everybody's pulled over and their heads are gawked up and you look up and all of a sudden there's this football triangular shaped object just hovering there. This is real stuff, but it doesn't make the news. People don't know. Just a sentence here, I'll read it. As the UFO passed, I'm reading from the book here, passed over town after town, local police departments again were flooded with calls. You think? There's a football field's craft flying in the sky. Now, if we have to remember one other thing at the same time, I like to kind of keep this thing going here. For some reason, remember when Kennedy was president from 61 to 63 when he was killed? And then for 13, 14 years before that, he was in the Senate and he was in Congress. And we went to the moon in 69. UFO sightings were off the charts all the time. When did these people start building underground facilities, whole cities and tunnels? After World War II, 46, 47, 48? And why? Speaking off the record, in the mid-1970s, government officials stated that, in fact, Mount Weather houses a resident backup government. So they built Many federal departments and agencies are represented there, including the Departments of Agriculture, Commerce, HUD, Interior, Labor, State Transportation and Treasury, agencies such as FEMA, the Office of the President, U.S. Postal Service, Federal Communications Commission, the Federal Reserve, Selective Service, Federal Power Commissions, the Civil Service. So we have an underground government. Let's see here. On one occasion during the Lyndon Johnson administration in the 1960s, that would be after Kennedy got killed, this source was sent to deliver some papers from the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Upon arrival, my source was escorted by 2 Secret Service agents to an elevator of the White House that is not open to the public. They entered the elevator and went down for what the source remembers as 17 levels under the White House. When the elevator doors opened, they stepped out into the corridor, covered on the walls, ceilings, and floor with beige ceramic tiles. The corridor was very long, stretching away at a distance, vanishing to a point. According to my source, other corridors and doors opened off the main. So, during all these UFO sightings, something else was going on. Project Montauk, we went through this video. This was a high-tech investigation into some technologies that were off the chart. So you have to take in I believe, you need to take into account everything that's going on. All these UFO sightings going on today. Day after day, see hovering objects that sometimes transferred shape. Riverside, California, November 17, 2014. Lying on trampoline with friend as child, light in a diamond or square sharp came together and apart several times, then shot off after hovering over the area for a short time. Lumbee, BC, California. It happened, this is 8/17/2014, Indiana. It happened in the dark night of the sky. An object like boomerang in shape and big in size emitted a small object that went inside the Bay of Bengal Sea, and the big ship flew away in a fraction of a second. So a huge ship showed up, a little ship flew out, and the huge ship flew away. 2014. I'm going to read you just a tidbit out of this book. Montauk is a Air Force base or military base at the end of Long Island. There were a number of Air Force technicians who had worked on the SAGE radar in the 1960s. So we're talking about the same time as my UFO book there. The Air Force had assigned them to Montauk, even though it was listed on the books as a decommissioned derelict base. The technicians told the Phoenix group that they could change the general mood of the base by changing the frequency and pulse duration of radar. Did you hear what I just said? That they could change the general mood of the base by changing the frequency and the pulse duration of the radar. So here they are at the end of Montauk, which is Long Island, way out towards the east, and they used that during World War II just to monitor if any German planes or subs or anything they could catch on radar was coming towards the USA. So one of the side effects they noticed that they could change the mood of the personnel on the base by changing the pulse rate of the radar, SAGE. They had noticed this as a professional courtesy as a years of working with radar. This was surprising to the Phoenix people, and they found it interesting by changing the pulse rate and pulse width, they could change the general way people were thinking. This was news, and this was something they were looking for. Another thing in this book, time warping. As the experiments continued throughout 1979, a very peculiar phenomenon was noticed. This is page 83. As Duncan thoughts were projected out through the transmitter, they would suddenly cease. This was disappointing and appeared to be a malfunction. Evidently, it was noticed that the projection of Duncan's thoughts hadn't ceased. They were just occurring out of the normal time stream. So my point is we talk about UFOs and aliens and John Kennedy, and then of course we have Dr. Stephen Greer, who's quite popular. And how to make contact with ET civilizations. That's what it says there. This is a recent document, I get them. Dr. Stephen Greer. How to make contacts with ETs. This is the guy that's been sponsoring programs to have hearings before Congress where eyewitnesses would come there and describe their UFO sightings. And he has events he puts on in the desert in California, city parks, where people get out there and do chants, mantras, and apparently can call forth ETs. Look up his material. I think that's a little strange, but it does open some doors to some possibilities of an explanation for all this. The ET Contact Tool provides you with a full course in these techniques, as well as a suite of tools to help you make contacts on your own. It includes 2 hours of audio tutorials, guided meditations, and tones, along with Dr. Greer's complete written guide on the science of making contact. I don't know about you, but I was younger, when you did incantations or meditations like that or chants, it was more like witchcraft, abracadabra, open sesame. Is that who these UFOs, what these UFOs are? Are they interdimensional beings? What does it have to do with the changing reality? What about the sky spraying? What does it have to do with the sky spraying? All the wars in the Middle East, the digging for artifacts in Iraq, Afghanistan, Palestine, Israel, the whole area, and in a lot of places in the world. And when very interesting finds are found, why do guys in black suits show up, confiscate all the material? Smithsonian people show up. There's just a lot of things we don't know. But I think if you pay attention to your reality around you, and go get books like this. Let me show you a few more. I'll just show you a few of the books and we'll be through with this video. But I collect books. That's why I decided to do these videos. What's the sense of me reading these books and not sharing them with you? So we've got a lot of work to do. But here's one. The Report on Unidentified Flying Objects by Rupert, who was in that other UFO book. Rupert's mentioned here a lot. UFO Evidence. Flying Saucers Have Landed. Here's another book. These are popular UFO writers. This one's dated back on Copyright 1953. I collect these. Here's a picture, a couple pictures. Remember, this is these are investigators back then. 1953. Mansky's book. Look at this. Remember the descriptions that we read about going on now that you can look up on MUFON. Here's an interesting disc, or UFO. Here's another one by Keyhole. He's mentioned a lot. Published in, you can go on used book sites and find these. This is a 1965. Just scanning this to see if there's any pictures in here. UFOs and the Alien Presence, 6 viewpoints. I haven't read this one yet. Published Michael Linderman. Copyright 1991. Extraterrestrial Friends and Foes, George Andrews. It's a little bit of research, but I'm trying to get a copy of every UFO book there ever was. Here's, I guess, George Andrews with a crystal skull. Maybe some of you have heard about that. So he wrote this book, which I'll have to read. The woman who made contact with the Kyla described him as follows. Carla looked like a tall, handsome human. That would be this book. Remember, this is a Masonry, Freemasonry and Satanism book review. So, Communication with Extraterrestrial Intelligence, SETA, by Carl Sagan. Probably promises to be a good read, you think? Some of the stuff I read, a lot of people say, well, no, why don't you pick up a novel? And I go, well, man, the stuff that I read is stranger than novels. Mysteries, legends, and unexplained phenomena, UFOs and aliens. And you got to do a little bit of work to find all these books. Here's a picture in this one that looks interesting. A UFO coming out of an egg? Just trying to make these videos I make a little interesting. I do have some humor. 1988, the Knowles family of Australia encountered a UFO that landed on the top of their car. If you go on used book sites, you can probably find some of these books cheap. Frank Edwards, Flying Saucers, Serious Business. Overwhelming new evidence they are real. These are all books I haven't found the time to read. There's a picture inside this book. So I probably have a lot to read. Maybe I'll never get it all done before I'm off this planet. Some of these books I have are probably quite interesting to read. Flying Saucers, the startling evidence of the invasion from outer space. Let's see, Fort Myers, Florida incident, Brazil incident. When was this book published? (1962). By Corel. Oh, this is a famous person mentioned a lot in the UFO Evidence book. Situation Red, the UFO Siege. Leonard Stringfield. Forward by Donald Keyhole. These are famous people. Little paperbacks. That was written in 1977. Invisible Residence. This was a fascinating book by Ivan Sanderson. I read a couple of his books. Fascinating author. And he talks a lot about ships at sea seeing these discs come flying right up out of the water and taking off. Sometimes buzzing the ship. Flying Saucers and the Straight Line Mystery. So they say there's a lot what they call ley lines, energy lines crisscrossing the Earth. Like over there in Europe. And apparently in a lot of cases of these UFO flights, they seem to follow a certain pattern. In other words, they're sighted in particular areas over and over and over again. Amy Mitchell. So like I said, go on a used book site. The UFO Enigma. A definitive explanation of the UFO phenomenon. I think this is one of the debunction books mentioned in the UFO Evidence large book I'm doing on this video review. So, I'll have to read about his debunking theory. Aliens Among Us. Ruth Montgomery. I like to find the pictures in these books. Underground alien bases. Flying saucers come from inside the Earth. Commander X. Flying saucers have been seen all around the world, coming in and out of the ground. You can see I read all this here. Got all my tabs there. This is supposed to be Dulce, New Mexico, the underground base that's in this book. This is the theory of the hollow earth, if you haven't heard about that one. Apparently on the North Pole and the South Pole, there are holes that go into the earth. And the water, as you can see on the outside of the earth here, flows into the earth, and they have lakes and oceans on the inside. And this earth here is between here and here is hundreds of miles. So I guess maybe in some way somebody would have somebody believe that Earth is some kind of gigantic spaceship. Richard Admiral Byrd is supposedly have so they got the Andes, Mount Everest, spaceships. So spaceships are coming in from under the water or under caves. Has all the pictures here where they come from. You might want to get this book if you want to look into that. So that's enough for this video. I dropped my pile of books. And there will be part 3. We'll continue on. And that should probably exhaust the UFO Evidence book. And people will maybe be able to come to some conclusions on their own. Rick Miracle reporting.